Welcome back, Math 2. Today we are going to be talking about those same the word problems, but today we're going to focus on finding x, or basically finding the x-intercepts. Okay? Now, if you picture a parabola, which I'll just draw them over here. Okay, here's a parabola. What we were finding yesterday, that vertex is referred to as the maximum. So that's why when they say, what is the maximum height, or can you reach this point? And you're like, well, how high can I even go? Today, though, we are focused on this point and this point. Where do we cross the x-axis? So that's usually like our starting and our landing point. Okay. The x-intercept often will tell us how long has something been in the air, or how long was this thing happening in total. Okay. So let's read that same problem. So Jason jumped off a cliff in the ocean in Acapulco while vacationing with some friends. His height as a function of time could be modeled by that function, where t is the time in seconds and h is the height in feet. So remember, Jason's on this cliff, and then he jumps off of it. Yay. Okay. So part C is Jason hit the water after how many seconds? Okay, so this is our water down here. We can basically think of that as 0, right? Height 0. If up here was height 480, that's where he was on the cliff. So they want to know, how long did that take? Okay, well, time was t, which in our book is also x. So we are basically going to be solving our equation up here for t. Okay, so this is where my quadratic formula comes in. So I'm going to write that out for you again. Over to A. Okay. And I'm just using a lot of space because I know I'm going to write a little bit big. But I've got h of t equals negative 16 t squared plus 16t plus 480. This is A, this is B, and this is C. So we definitely want to use the quadratic formula on this one. So I'm going to have negative B, oh my gosh, not B, negative 16 plus or minus the square root of B squared, so 16 squared minus 4 times A times C. And that whole thing over 2 times A. Okay. Everything under the square root, I'm going to type into my calculator. Ooh, comes out to be a very, very big number. I do not have much room to do this. I'm going to try zooming in, seeing if that... Okay. And I end up with negative 16 plus or minus the square root of 30,976 all over negative 32. Okay. Now, I don't know if 30, that's not a negative 30, by the way, that just, my pen didn't quite. Okay. So I don't know if that has a square root, but I'm going to check it out, because either way, whether it has a square root or not, I need that number because they actually want a time. How long did it take for him to hit the water? Let's find out if it has a square root. Ooh, it does. It has a square root of 176. So I'm going to have negative 16 plus 176 divided by negative 32. And negative 16 minus 176 divided by negative 32. And I'm going to solve those two things. So this comes out to be negative 5. Now that's a nice number, but when we think about time, time should not be negative. So that's probably not going to be my answer. So let's try it the other way. And I get 6. That makes much more sense. So I don't want to use this one because it's negative, and negative seconds don't exist. So 6 seconds is going to be my answer. It takes him 6 seconds of falling, basically, from this cliff. That's a little scary to think about. Okay. Let's try another one. All right. If a toy rocket is launched vertically upward from ground level with initial velocity of 128 feet per second, then its height h after t seconds is given by that equation. Part A, how long will it take for the rocket to return to the ground? Okay. Now notice there's no number on the end of negative 16t squared plus 128t because our rocket started from the ground. So now we want to know, okay, it started from the ground. When is it going to hit the ground? This point right here. Okay. So I'm just going to take my equation here as it is, set it equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve. So I can still use that quadratic formula as long as I remember that C is 0. I want to know, when does it hit 0? Okay. Another thing I could do, since they both have a t in them, I can take a t out. So I can have 0 equals t, and then I have negative 16t plus 128. And I can set both of those equal to 0. So there's t equals 0, meaning 0 seconds, or negative 16t plus 128 equals 0. I'll subtract 128, and I get negative 16t equals negative 128. Divide by negative 16. 128 divided by 16 equals 8 seconds. Okay, that makes much more sense. So this is their start, and this is how long it took to get to the ground. So 8 seconds. Okay. Let's look at question B. After how many seconds will the rocket be 112 feet above the ground? Okay. This is a little bit different question. So we are still going to be able to use that quadratic formula, but now I'm looking for, okay, when did it hit 112 feet? So I have to change something about my equation here. I want to know, when did my equation or my rocket hit or equal 112 feet? So I'm actually using this equation because remember, it has to be equal to 0 before I start solving. Okay. So now I'm going to use the quadratic formula again, using this as A, B, and C. Okay. So I'm going to have negative 128 plus or minus the square root of 128 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 112 all over 2 times A. So again, negative 32. Again, I'm going to type all of that stuff under the square root in my calculator. And I get, negative 128 plus or minus the square root of 9,216 over negative 32. I'm going to bring it down here so I can fit all of this. And again, whether or not 9,216 has a square root, I need that number. Oh, it does have a square root of 96. So this equals 96. So I need negative 128 plus 96 divided by negative 32. And negative 128 minus 96 divided by negative 32. Okay. Now, real quick, before I actually solve this, let's think about why we're getting 2 answers here as well. Because you're like, we just want to know when it hit 112. But remember, when it goes up, it hits 112. And then when it comes back down, it also hits 112. But this is the one I really want, the first time. So whichever time is smaller, that's the first time that it hits 112. So let's see. Negative 128 plus 96. Whoops. Divided by negative 32 is 1. Okay, I'm going to guess that's going to be my answer, but let's test our other one. And that comes out to be 7. So I'm going to say this is the first time, so it took 1 second to reach 112